Good afternoon. Welcome to Quest Connect, first Sunday of the month. My name's Allison Boyle and I'm one of the facilitators at Quest for Life. Thank you very much for joining me, whether it be live or whether you're catching up with this broadcast a bit later on. So I'm coming to you from Gadigal country, so I'd like to acknowledge the elders past, present and emerging. And I'd also really like to acknowledge that today is Father's Day. So to all the fathers out there, congratulations on this being your special day, but also perhaps let's acknowledge fathers who are present, fathers who are no longer with us, and there can be, a lot of mixed feelings that go along with that. And also let's acknowledge the father figures, people that we may not be biologically connected to, but they have made a significant impact on our lives. So an acknowledgement to the fathers. And some of you may want to have a listen to my colleague Sandy's broadcast that I think happened on Wednesday morning at home with Quest, where she talked about self-care for fathers. So I would encourage you to have a look at that. So I'm imagining that maybe there will be a lot of families today who may be out for lunch or, getting together in some way. And so we might not get a lot of people joining live today. And I will just trust that you can see me and hear me because there's nobody out there right now. So how are we going to spend this next hour together? Well, you might be aware that the advertised topic is about forgiveness, and that's where we're going to do an exploration today. I'm aware that even the word forgiveness can be really tricky for some people, so I would like you to look after yourself during this next hour that we spend together. And if it is a bit triggering, then, feel free to skip this episode or, look after yourself, come back to it later, whatever you need to do. But my intention for this hour is to do an exploration of this topic. And I would be really grateful if we could kind of put aside any ideas that we might have around having to forgive, or we should forgive, or we won't be well if we don't forgive. I'd like us to put that aside because it's a bit limiting. And the way I would approach this is literally, well, let's be curious and explore this topic and see if it does have some relevance for us. So that's where I'm going with it. But before we get into the content, let's do what we always do and just take a moment to come to our senses, just to arrive. So just perhaps start by taking 3 conscious breaths. And maybe with the exhalation, perhaps just letting go a little bit. Having that sense of arriving, and with each outward breath, maybe we just relax just a little bit more. And then let's take our awareness to each of the senses as I name them. So take your awareness to your sense of touch, your bottom on the seat, your feet on the floor, anything that your hands might be touching. Touch your clothing against your skin. Then shift your awareness to any taste in the mouth or any sensation in the mouth. Any aromas in the air. Anything you can see, even if your eyes are closed, or what falls within the field of your gaze. And then anything you can hear. Sounds that are close by. Sounds in the room. And sounds outside of the room. And just let sounds come and go. Not needing to label it or think about the sound. You can just know that it's sound. Maybe you can pick up one sound and then let it go and find another sound. It's about you placing your attention where you want to be. And then back to the breath. Just taking that one breath as you bring your awareness back into the room or wherever you are. Just notice what you notice as a result of doing that little practice. It doesn't have to be anything, just notice what's there. So I can see that Glyn is with us. So thank you very much, Glyn. I'm taking it that you can hear me and see me. I'm taking that as a very positive sign, so thank you. So the topic of forgiveness. And we will explore this in terms of what is forgiveness, how can we approach this, what's involved in the process, what forgiveness is and what it's not, what do other people say about forgiveness, how might we do it, how might we approach it, and then of course, you know, how do we forgive ourselves as well, self-forgiveness. So that's the territory. And as I've said, if forgiveness is a tricky word, sometimes just the word acceptance can be kind of a way in, and we'll explore this together. But let's just think about what the word forgiveness actually means. Really, it can mean to pardon an offence, to stop seeking punishment. It can mean that. But in this session, what we're really going to focus on exploring a little bit more in terms of a definition is more about giving up or releasing ourselves from resentment, indignation, and constant anger that can accompany that. So that's what we're going to be focusing our exploration on. So the act of forgiveness actually deals with our own emotions. I really want to emphasize that our own emotions is a huge part of this. So therefore it doesn't require the involvement of the other person, if there is another person involved, or the situation that caused us pain. And in fact, in many cases, that might not even be possible. It's a willingness to move past it. There's an element of choice in it, and it's a process that takes time. And it can take a long time for very good reason. And that often it's a process that we need to revisit. And you might choose not to, right? Because the key word here is choice, as opposed to reacting in a way that's very automatic. So the key word here is choice. There's a podcast that I listened to the other day about emotionally immature people, and I might do a session on this in the future. And one of the things that Lindsay Gibson, who's written a lot of material around emotional immaturity, one of the things she said is, when she was talking about forgiveness, she said, you know, it's not really kind of like a cognitive decision that we make to forgive, although sometimes you might. It comes more as a result of the process of working through the emotion. It's not just something that you can kind of make happen, you know, tomorrow I'm going to give, or right now I'm going to forgive. So to me, that says timing is really, really important. And I have this sense sometimes that almost the act of forgiveness catches up with us, because it's a little bit like, once we've processed the emotion, once we've processed the anger and everything that goes with it, and maybe we have, taken steps to seek justice, whatever it might be, then eventually it's almost just like the sting goes out of it. You think about the situation or the person, whatever it might be, and it's just not got the same sting or the same stickiness that it once had to pull you immediately into anger, resentment, whatever. So I have that sense of, rather than it being something you just decide to do, that it's almost like something that catches up. But that's just my take on it. You think about it for yourself. Let's look at what it's not. And let's be really clear that it is not about condoning bad behaviour, abusive behaviour. It's absolutely not about that. It's also not about forgetting, as if that's possible. And it's certainly not about moving on quickly. And I want to just explore for a minute the concept of what's called toxic forgiveness, because I think it links into this sense of people feeling as though they have to do this really quickly, they have to move on really quickly, there might be pressure to move on quickly. And sometimes we see situations that have happened to people who publicly very quickly declare, forgiveness, and that might be genuine for them. But often if you're left watching that, it's sort of like, wow, I wouldn't be there yet. So Psychology Today, I'm just going to read this, talks about what is toxic forgiveness. It occurs when someone forgives another person superficially or prematurely, often without addressing the underlying hurt or allowing time for genuine healing. It's often a response to pressure, either from oneself or from others or society, to let go, to move on, without adequately processing the emotions that are involved. And that's why I made such a big deal in the beginning about forgiveness is about dealing with our own emotion. Toxic forgiveness can also manifest when forgiveness is granted out of fear. Fear of conflict, or maybe physical safety, to maintain peace at all costs due to various expectations. And it can be problematic because it bypasses the essential emotional work that's involved if you are going to, at some stage, experience or choose to forgive. So just be careful about perhaps not feeling pressurized. Oh, come on, move on. It's been years now. It's been months now. That's just not the way it works. So it's not about condoning. It's not about forgetting. It's not about moving on quickly. By all means, we often say at Quest, rant and rail at it for as long as you need to. Release the energy that accompanies that. Feel the painful feelings. If necessary and if appropriate, bring the person to justice. That's fine. You can choose not to let someone off the hook morally or legally, but you can still want to come to peace within yourself about what happened. So finding forgiveness can walk hand in hand with pursuing justice. It's not an either or. And it's also not about reconciliation. That's another choice. So it's not necessarily about that either. Choosing to forgive might not mean choosing to have that person in your life any longer. There's often a fear, however, that if we do engage in forgiveness, that means that we approve But again, it's possible to both, condemn a behaviour and a situation, but no longer be stuck in the repetitive cycle of being angry and resentful at the person who did it or the situation. You could continue to feel sad at the impact on yourself or on others and take action to make sure it never happens again if that's possible. But you no longer feel aggrieved, resentful, reproachful, or vengeful, you know. So we can see why it's a process, right? And I think, again, that thing about it being a process is sometimes if, we still have a particular person in our life who's tricky or who's wronged us or who we get very angry at, and they are someone who is going to be in our life, or we choose to have them in our life, but at one level we know that they won't change, they are relentlessly and consistently themselves, then it may be that we have to revisit this whole process over and over again. And again, I'm not necessarily talking about severe abuse here in this context. I'm really just talking about those people who we really rub up against, who where we're just maybe not a good fit with or we clash with. And so, yeah, this might be a pattern and this might need to be revisited over and over again. But again, a reminder that this is an inner process. It's something we do for ourselves because it's about releasing or liberating ourselves from the wounding of the past, as opposed to holding on to the resentment. Because holding on to the resentment means that we choose to live in a very reactive state, to swim in that chemistry, high circulating levels of stress chemicals, cortisol, that are hugely inflammatory and can literally make us sick. So we don't want to be defined by what's happened, often what's that saying about resentment? It's like, the resentment's happening in me. It's like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die, Petrie often talks about forgiveness, has been described as forgiving up all hope of a better past. That, it did happen and it happened to me. That bit I can't change. But where I have influence is how can I be in relationship to that? Am I going to let it define, the rest of my life? Am I going to allow it to take up massive amounts of real estate in my head? And when I'm doing that, where's the space for joy, creativity, optimism, humour? Where's the space for that? Because it's taken up all this real estate. So this is where the acceptance piece for me comes in. This is where I find it, I can enter at this point. It's about accepting the reality of what's happened, or the limitation, perhaps, of another person. That's something I'm dealing with at the moment. And accepting that possibly that won't change. In fact, it definitely won't change. And if I'm expecting it to change, then I'm on a hiding to nowhere. So it's just about accepting that as a reality. I don't have to like it. I don't have to agree with it. But that sense of it is what it is. So not hanging on to a false sense of reality that this is going to change. And so you can see in our exploration that ironically the person who gains most from forgiveness is usually the one who does the forgiving, because again it opens up more space. And Psychology Today talks about the benefits of forgiveness being things like an elevated mood, enhanced optimism, etc., etc., all those juicy qualities. And, ironically, it might also mean the act of forgiveness or just acceptance. It might mean being a little bit more open or having space for an attitude of compassion. That's both self-compassion, like, God, this has been really rough, and even sometimes compassion for the other person. And again, I want to emphasize that this is a process, meaning that, and this is, what Petrea has often said, meaning that we're no longer the victim in our story. Forgiveness allows us to have a story, but no longer live in the story, because we've processed the feelings elicited by the event and we've woven them in to the story of what's happened and into the fabric of the past. We haven't forgotten about it, but we're aware that that has happened and it's woven in. It's not front and center. It's kind of like not in the driver's seat all the time. So what do other people say about forgiveness? Well, Nelson Mandela, when he was released from jail and was back into politics, and they said, forgiveness, how can this be? And he said, well, the people of South Africa, we do want revenge. Like, there's part of us that do want revenge. It's just that we want peace more. And I think that's such an important thing. Again, it's this not getting caught up in the duality, the either or, the black and white thinking. It is okay to, rant and rail, to be angry and, feel like you want revenge, of course. Why wouldn't you? But who's in the driver's seat? We just want peace more. Rick Hansen, who is a kind of favourite psychologist and writer, he's American, and if you get the opportunity to have a look at his website, lots and lots of positive resources there. And he is also very influential in terms of meditation practice and kind of neuropsychology as well. So he says, fundamentally, forgiveness frees you from the tangles of anger and retribution. I'm reading this now, I've got some notes here. And from preoccupations with the past or running the case in your mind about the person or the situation you're mad at. It shifts your sense of self from a passive one in which bad things happen to you to one where you're active in changing your own attitudes. So I'm pausing there because there's agency in that, isn't there? As opposed to what we're talking about before, about just being a victim. Now he says, you're a hammer now, you're no longer a nail. It widens your view to see the truth of many, many things that make people act as they do. You don't have to agree with it. Placing whatever happened in a context of a larger whole. Petrea says, no matter what's happened to us, we can choose our attitude to life, to the past, to the future, to now. Forgiveness keeps us from reacting in the present to what's happened in the past. There's also a passage in a novel called The Storyteller by Jodi Picoult, and I'm going to read this. I was so full of so much anger that sometimes I woke in the middle of the night with the taste of it in my mouth, like tin. One day I went to see our priest and I asked what I could do to feel less angry. I was expecting him to say something like, get a job, write your feelings down on paper. By the way, that can be helpful. Instead, he told me to forgive my dad. I stared at the priest, convinced he was nuts. I can't do that, I told him. It would make what he did seem less awful. The priest said, what he did was wrong. He doesn't deserve your love, but he does deserve your forgiveness, because otherwise he will grow like a weed in your heart until it's choking you and overrun. The only person who suffers when you squirrel away all that hate is you. Forgiving isn't something you do for someone else. It's something you do for yourself. It's saying, you're not important enough to have a stranglehold on me. It's saying, you don't get to trap me in the past. I'm worthy of a future. So it's kind of a different way of thinking about it. And again, you don't have to agree with any of this. I'm just trying to pull together what other people have said and present it for our joint exploration. So, how do we do it? How can we engage with the process of forgiveness? Well, I'm quite interested in this because I have someone in my life at the moment in a situation that, I'm struggling with. And this particular person is just relentlessly and consistently themselves. They're not going to change. And yet a new situation has come up where, I really want them to act in a certain way, and they won't. They won't. And I can really relate to that sense of having to revisit and revisit and revisit. Because many years ago, when I first came to Quest, and I heard that little mantra of, there's X doing X. Nobody does X better than X does. If I want X to be any different, I'm going to suffer. There's X doing X now. And that really resonated with me, with this particular person. And I, keeping that in mind, that some people are just relentlessly and consistently themselves, that they've got limitations, the relationship's going to have limitations, it really, really helped me to kind of not get into power struggles, drop the rope a little bit, if you like. It wasn't a solution, it wasn't a strategy, but energetically it changed things in me for quite a long time, until fairly recently, when something kind of new's come up and I find myself back, where I was. So it's really interesting. You can have done some of this process and work, but a new situation can arise and you're not back to square one. I'm really not, because I can't unknow what I know now. But it does require revisiting, and reprocessing. So, it's a challenge. How can I be in relationship or in relation to this situation? I don't have to like it, but it's here anyway. So how can I be in relationship to it? So how do we do this? What might some ideas be? And I don't know that this is a recipe, but again, I've taken this from Rick Hansen, who says self-care is really important. Now, that's something we talk about at Quest all the time. I mean, literally to protect yourself from ongoing harm. I mean, if it's an abusive situation, of course, protect yourself. Do what you can to repair the damage that's been done to you. Now, that might be physical, mental, emotional, spiritual damage, and you might need help with that. You might need the help of a good therapist, a trauma-informed therapist. Absolutely. He also says ask for support. It's much easier to forgive after others bear witness to the ways you've been mistreated. It's important to bear witness to the harms done to others. Now, if any of you have been at Quest, you know that this is quite a significant part of our programme, where we do bear witness in a non-judgmental setting, when there's agreements around confidentiality, where people tell us a little bit about, what's been going on and their reaction to it and what they'd like to take away. And honouring, witnessing those stories is hugely powerful. Most people don't want to do it. Often the facilitators and the team don't want to do it either. But we do. And it really forges that sense of connection, and that lessens the feeling of isolation and being alone with it. So, yeah, bearing witness is really important. Obviously, if you're going to choose to, talk with a trusted friend, they need to be someone that you trust. But also, that's where therapy can come in. Honour the wound. Try not to be overwhelmed, but be open to the shock, hurt, sense of injustice, anger, and other aspects of the experience. Allow the thoughts and feelings and related desires to have some space, to have some breathing room, and watch as they ebb and flow over time. Forgiveness is not about shutting down your feelings, Rick Hansen says. It's about opening to the experience in a space of mindful awareness, and that's a real aid to forgiveness. And we talk at Quest about the mansion of emotion, that we have this imaginary mansion in our mind body where there's room for all feelings. And it's not that there's good feelings, bad feelings, it's just all feelings. And so we create a space to be with those feelings. We don't have to get stuck there. Our mansion has windows, it has doors, it has corridors, but there's a place for all the feelings. And, to spend time with the feelings might be around, first of all, having to identify what the feeling is, Right now I'm in the angry room, or right now I'm in the absolutely frustrated room, whatever it might be. Okay, if you can name it, you can tame it. Sometimes we don't know what we're feeling because we are overwhelmed, so make it up. Make up a name. Impending doom, feeling out of sorts. And once we've identified the feeling, okay, can we really give ourselves permission to feel it, and to feel it with awareness? And sometimes that's not easy because we may never have been instructed with much emotional language. We may never have been allowed to feel our feelings fully as we were grown up, like even the good feelings, like come on now, settle down, don't get too excited as if something bad's going to happen because you're too joyous. Or for some people, they might get messages around, come on, you're a big boy now, and big boys don't cry, whatever it might be. So then to confront our feelings and give ourselves permission to feel it with awareness can be tricky, can be a new experience. And feeling it with awareness means feeling it in the body. That's where it's happening. The body's key to this. The body's often where we sometimes get the first awareness that there's a feeling going on. That tightness in the throat, or hot feeling in the head, churning in the stomach, butterflies in the tummy, whatever it might be. But feel it with awareness. And then not leaving it there, but okay, given that I'm feeling this way, given that I am really frustrated, given that I am really angry, what do I need right now? Okay, well, the first thing might be, if I'm really that angry and frustrated, maybe I'm choosing not to speak. When the blood boils, don't speak. Maybe I'm going to choose to exit stage left. Maybe I'm going to choose to get out for a walk and pound the pavement and shift some of this energy that I'm feeling. Maybe I'm going to write it down. That can be really helpful to externalize it. Maybe in other situations, I'm going to phone a friend. But given that I'm having this feeling right now, what might I need? The other thing Rick Hansen says is, I think this is a good one, and I'm engaging with this one right now. Check your story. Okay, watch out for exaggerating how awful, significant, or unforgivable the incident or the situation was. Now, again, we're not talking about, serious violence or abuse here. We're talking about you know, the majority of lumps and bumps that we bump into with other people, you know. Also be careful about assuming intent. You know, don't feed the narrative. Um, with modern life, most of us are pretty stressed, and maybe unfortunately you just bumped into someone else's bad day, bad week, bad month, or, as I say, you know, the fact that that particular person's quite limited, um, emotionally limited. So put the event into perspective, put the event into, you know, some sort of context. He also said appreciate the value of forgiveness. Ask yourself, what does my grievance, my anger, my resentment cost me? You know, we talked about that earlier. When we are ruminating, when the situation and the person has taken up all that real estate, you know, that space that we don't have for fun, joy, spontaneity. So what does it cost me? What does it cost others that I care about? You know, and that can be confronting, can't it? It's like, right, because I might not be the easiest to be around right now. What would it be like, he says, to lay those burdens down? What would that be like? You know, many years ago, when I worked in healthcare, I was a member of an internal mediation team to mediate workplace conflicts. And we used to do an assessment before the mediation went ahead. And I was always struck by and saddened by some people, not everyone, who was involved in conflict. And, you know, maybe there had been cases of bullying or harassment and they tried to resolve it in some ways. But they were so attached to the grievance and so attached to the story and the wrong that was done. And it's not to take anything away from that, but it was taking up so much space in their head. They literally could not see any other solution, that they had any other choice, you know. And you could see that it was really, really dragging people down, you know. So I think that thing about what's it actually costing me is an important one. Rick Hansen also says, see the bigger picture. Consider the 10,000 causes upstream from the person who hurt you, like his or her life, childhood, parents, finances, temperament, health, a mental state, you know, just before whatever happened. And as I said to you earlier, the situation I'm dealing with at the moment, you know, I know that there are issues in the background that causes this person to be the way they are and be a bit emotionally immature, and I know that. But again, it's like on a good day, or when I did the emotional processing a few years ago, you know, that allowed some compassion to come in. But because a new situation's come up, even as I'm reading this to you now, there's part of me wants to go, but right now I don't care about what's happened to them, you know. And I have to honour that too, that's where I'm at right now, yeah. So hear this information depending on where you're at. I'm not going to stick with that, but yeah. Help yourself come to peace. Accept that the past is fixed and won't change. The bad thing will never not have happened. And that's what I think about that acceptance piece. It's not acceptance as in thinking that it's okay, condoning it. It's not. It's just accepting that it happened. Disengage your mind from the story, the narrative, especially that rumination, going over it and over it and over it again. That's a recipe for depression. Steer clear of people who fan the flames of outrage. And this is also an important one. Again, when I think back to my mediation days, there was always people fanning the flames. You know, there was always the bystanders who might, have something, some secondary gain into, yes, it was awful, it was terrible, blah, blah, blah. And, it may have been, but they're actually fanning it, maybe for their own entertainment. Focus on the good things in your life, on gratitude. It's bad enough that people have harmed you. Don't add insult to injury, but getting caught up with them inside your own head. For example, they may have gotten away with some of your money, but don't give them your mind. Good, some good advice. So just pause for a minute and just have a little kind of reflection around how's this landing for you. So far we've talked about a couple of definitions of forgiveness. Sure, one is around to pardon, but what we're focusing on today is more that sense of releasing, releasing resentment, indignation, anger. We've talked a lot about forgiveness being an internal process, something you do for yourself, working through the emotions, liberating ourselves from the wounding of the past. We've looked at some ways that we might do that, and we've also looked at how it's not like, right, I've forgiven and that's it. If the person or the situation is still a part of your life, then we may have to engage with this process over and over again. It can be a lifelong work. So Glenn's saying that just by chance she listened to a meditation on forgiveness this morning. Wow. Okay, and Glenn's also talking about self-forgiveness, about something you did a long time ago. So excellent segue, Glenn, because that's where we're just going now. Also see that we've got Julie with us, and that's lovely too. Welcome, Julie. So I hope this is landing for you. So, having said all of that, who is the person that we need to forgive most often? Usually it's ourselves. And self-forgiveness, what does that look like? Well, self-forgiveness is also about unhooking ourselves from our patterns of self-blame, self-criticism, self-sabotage, or when we've done the wrong thing, when we've wronged someone else. And I think that's really, it's really interesting to think about self-forgiveness in relationship to our patterns and beliefs. Do we find that we're continually giving ourselves a hard time, being self-critical? Do we tend towards a little bit of perfectionism? Maybe not a little bit of perfectionism, maybe just perfectionism. And we're never going to attain that. So are we always falling short? Are we always giving ourselves a hard time? So yeah, how unhooking ourselves from that is big, and it's a huge challenge. And one of the things that can be super helpful here is, we talked a little bit about compassion, and self-compassion can be the way in and can be the antidote to this, but it's not always easy, so finding compassion for ourselves can be hard. Sometimes if we've done something wrong or we've stuffed up in some way, there may be other feelings that accompany with it, guilt, shame. Guilt is, I've done something wrong, I've done the wrong thing, which can be appropriate to feel guilty if you've done something wrong, versus shame, which is, it's not so much I've done something wrong, but it's I am wrong, I am bad, so we've made it our whole identity. And perhaps here we need to think about, how would we speak to another person? How would we speak to a friend if they were struggling with this, right? We would probably speak with kindness and generosity. We'd probably give them a bit of space. We'd probably listen to them. We'd probably tell them that, well, you're human and we've all stuffed up. And I know it seems huge at the moment, but can you see the wider context here? We'd probably do stuff like that. And yet when it's ourselves, are we as kind to ourselves as we are to others? So this is not about letting ourselves off the hook either. Again, it's not about an either or, like we talked about before. Self-forgiveness can coincide with self-corrective behaviour. It can coincide with challenging our own automatic thoughts, words and deeds. It can coincide with reflection on our own self-talk, our own words, our own deeds. And I just want to, I got a bit distracted there because I just want to make clear the difference between reflection and rumination. So reflection is around, okay, I've done something wrong, I've stuffed up, blah, blah, blah. All right, let's think about what happened, maybe take some corrective action. I don't know, maybe we need to apologise, maybe we need to make it right if that's possible. But the big thing is, how do I learn from this? How do I not let this happen again? And that's not achieved by spending hours ruminating on how awful we are, how appalling it was, how terrible it was, which is rumination. Reflection is, okay, what happened? What were some of the contributing factors to the fact that that happened? Okay. What is the corrective action I could take? And what would allow me not to engage in that again? What would increase my chances of not losing it again? Whatever it might be. And that might mean, okay, I need to really step up my self-care. It means I might need some counselling. It might mean things like, actually, so that I don't stuff that up again, I actually need to learn. Like there was a big gap in my actual